Hi, I'm Patrick Gomez, editor-in-chief at the AV Club, but you don't really care about who I am. You are more concerned with our lovely guests here today, Dan Levy and Annie Murphy, who are here from, obviously, Schitt's Creek, one of my favorite shows, I hope one of yours, which sadly came to an end after a fantastic sixth season. Thank you guys so much for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So we mentioned, obviously, the finale was so recently, and you had to watch it and enjoy it and see everyone else enjoy it while at home and in this new quarantined era. What was that experience like for you guys, knowing that this was coming? And I'm sure you had celebrations in mind that you weren't able to really partake in.
Thank goodness for technology. We were supposed to have done a big fan event in Toronto and then a big event in New York City to celebrate the finale of the show. Obviously, we couldn't do that. And instead, we ended up doing our fundraiser, which ended up raising over $200,000 for Feeding America and Food Banks Canada. So in a way, it felt like it was such a nice way to say goodbye to the show, knowing that people had rallied together for a good cause. And we made the most of it as a cast. We all got on a Zoom chat together, and there was about 12 of us, and we all just sort of watched the show and also watched each other watch the show, which was very nice.
I was just going to say, we also watched your dad and Catherine try to figure out how to use not only Zoom, but their cell phones or iPads. And they each was giving the other one advice, like totally unsolicited advice and incorrect advice on how to properly use their technology. And I think that was more entertaining for me than the show was.
Yeah, it's been a trying time for everyone, technologically speaking. But, I think we made the most out of it that we possibly could. And, I was just very thrilled that people seem to really like it.
I will say I got the chance to come up and visit you guys on set. And during the 2 days I was there, Catherine did grab my phone twice to adjust settings and things that she said were very important in terms of optimizing my phone battery and such. So maybe she's got a little technical savvy there that I certainly did not. But I imagine that was an interesting experience watching them try to tutor each other.
Oh, it was beautiful.
So this is the most recent event for you guys in terms of Schitt's Creek, but let's jump back to the beginning. Dan, let's start with you because this started as a germ of an idea in your head. Walk us through I'm sure you get a lot of really great, fun and creative ideas. Why was this the one that stuck as something you really wanted to pursue?
I don't even know if it was the one. I mean, it was just sort of the first major idea that came to me, and the first idea that I had that I thought could benefit from collaborating with my dad. And I think for a long time I avoided any kind of association with him because I feel like this industry is incredibly unforgiving when it comes to just the blanket labeling of nepotism and this kind of very quick to judge idea that if you happen to go into your family business that you somehow didn't earn it yourself. So I think for me, it was really important that if I was going to involve myself with him or if we were going to do something together, that the idea that I brought to him and the ideas that I had within that idea were strong enough to really hold my own in terms of a collaboration with him, creatively speaking. And this was really the first one that I felt like had legs. And so we began to talk about it, and slowly but surely the ideas fell into place. And I think when you're dealing with something, when it works, it really works. And I think that works for anything in terms of, from a writing standpoint. It just, one thing fell into place after the other, and sure, it was challenging, but it was really fun. And it never stopped being fun from those first early days of putting the show together till the very last days of shooting it and even in post. So, it's some ideas have legs and some don't. And I was very lucky that the idea that I happened to bring to my dad that day had some legs and some guts to it.
And Annie, I know you mentioned in the lovely, had me in tears as much as the finale documentary that aired after that evening. You had mentioned that you were in a pretty pretty precarious situation, not precarious, but you were ready to kind of say, maybe this isn't for me.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about where you were when this project kind of came into your life, and how it progressed into you actually getting the part.
I will tell you. I hadn't worked in 2 years. My apartment had just freshly burnt down, and I had a very small number of dollars in the bank, and I had just blown my very first screen test that I had ever been offered, and so I decided that acting was not for me. And the day that I kind of like screamed out into the universe that I was probably going to just go to secretarial school or something, the day after that, I got the audition for Schitt's Creek. And I saw Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara's names attached to it. And I blacked out and woke up and was like, this has to be my life. This has to be my life. And at the very least, I will get to meet Eugene Levy. That's how I thought things worked back then. I don't know. And so I got all excited to meet Eugene Levy, and then I walked into the audition room, and it was Dan.
Even better, some might say.
Some might say. Some might say, yeah.
1 in 116 might argue.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the actual statistic. And so I auditioned, and it was the only time in my life that I walked out of an audition and was like, I did all I could do in there. And if I don't get it, I don't get it, but I did it. I did what I wanted to do. And then I got a call from not Eugene, but Dan a couple of days later saying,
sorry.
Yeah, me too.
Disappointment after disappointment.
Saying that they wanted to see me for the role of Stevie. And so I know that's like a head spinner, because no one could do Stevie as Emily Hampshire does Stevie. So I ended up testing for both Stevie and Alexis. And then I waited for about 3 weeks, heard nothing, and was like, okay, well, if I hear something, it's just going to be them being like, thank you so much, we're passing, as I usually heard. And so finally I get a call, and it says Eugene Levy on my call display. And I was like, yes! But then I was also too terrified to actually answer the phone. So I didn't answer the phone, and then finally called back. And it was Dan on the other end of the phone. And he proceeded to say, thank you so much for coming out. We really loved what you did, but yeah. So, and then nothing. And then he didn't speak. For 70 years. He didn't speak. And then finally, as my trembling voice was like, thanks for the opportunity, he was like, oh, just one quick question. How would you like to play my sister on the show? And that moment changed my whole life. So sometimes being a brat pays off, huh?
Sometimes it makes for great stories. Sometimes a little pizzazz in the casting process just does some good.
You're just being spicing things up for me.
Yeah,
just spicing things up.
Yeah, personality in a nutshell.
Well, you mentioned Eugene and Catherine being a draw when you saw the description of the series. For both of you, I mean, obviously there's aspects of Eugene being a part of your life since the very beginning, Dan, but in terms of working on this project, what did having them on set and being able to learn from them mean to you all, and what do you feel like you took away from having their presence just being there on a daily basis?
Well, at the time I had no experience in television, scripted television, and I didn't really have any barometer of what was how regular television shows operated. We only had this show, and I think what my dad and Catherine have managed to do over, I think, the entirety of their careers is navigate a level of notoriety without ever letting it get to their heads, or without having that become part of what they carry into the workplace. I mean, it's quite incredible to see them operate on a day-to-day basis on a set, because it is so about the work. It has nothing to do with ego. It has nothing to do with the rank on the call sheet. It has everything to do with, are we mining the absolute most out of the scene? Are we getting it as funny as we possibly can? Are my lines as tight or as sharp as they possibly could be? It's so collaborative, and it's so welcoming, and it's so open and egoless that I think, I mean, not to speak for both of us, but from my own standpoint, it made for such a free and stress-free environment, particularly when you're just trying to get your sea legs as an actor. Having heard stories of just how high intensity and how volatile sets can be, I'm very grateful that they had set a tone for all of us that was so professional and so about the work, that the trickle down effect was felt in every department. There was no, any tension that ever happened on our set was ultimately because of, trying to figure out how to make the best possible show we can, and not really navigating the ego side of things.
See, my experience with them was completely different than that. You said everything that I would have dreamed to say about them, except for in addition.
You're freezing again in the most anticlimactic part of this whole story.
Am I back yet?
Yeah, you're back. Try it again.
Okay. Just to add to what you said, as they are deeply, deeply, deeply professional, but they also carry with them such a huge sense of joy and playfulness and fun. And I think it's from their improv backgrounds. Like, Catherine would constantly be like, how about we try it like this? And then Eugene will get on board, and then they'll try something out. And they just radiate this pure joy all the time. And then when they're offset, you find them harmonizing old songs from the 1930s. And they just spread so much light on set.
Well, that showed on camera. This was a little show that could. You started and you didn't have a huge budget. How did that impact production, Dan? And how did that force you to get creative? I know you've mentioned, particularly with wardrobe, that you got super creative. You yourself kind of searching consignment stores and websites and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably show you all the gray hair I have from our lack of budget, but that's not what I would call quality content. I think great things come out of high stakes, high pressure situations. And I think the fact that, our show, the entirety of our show is basically summed up in the first 10 seconds of the Maisel budget. It's you are working with very little. And at the same time, our hopes for the show and the scope of the show and the aesthetic of the show, I wanted to, I never wanted the show to compromise in those areas. So in order to achieve that, you really had to cut corners. You had to think creatively in terms of, the wardrobe. It was really important for me that this family wear designer clothing. And it wasn't just, Alexis's character wasn't just, a strand of pearls around a white button down to give the illusion of wealth, that the button down be recognizable to people who are interested in fashion, and that there be an entire story that was told in addition to what we were just scripting. And in order to do that, every day I was shopping 365 days for this show, and keeping the clothes in my closets and trying to find deals. And as even as we were breaking story in the writer's room, I was then looking out for pieces that could be conducive to those particular stories and scenes. The minute we knew that we had, a wedding my brain went straight to what are each of these characters going to wear. I would have emails with Deborah Hansen, who's our costume designer, but she was only on for the 3 months that we shot the show. So the other 9 months was just me kind of juggling, these purchases, hoping that when I brought them into set that Deborah would agree with some of my choices. And fortunately, we were on the same page with a lot of it. But yeah, I mean, it was a constant struggle. It was a constant push in terms of saying, well, we can't clear that song. And then me saying, well, what do we need to do? Do we need to write a letter to the artist to get them to clear it? Can anyone call someone else? How do we go about doing it? I mean, even early on, the best was potentially not going to clear. And, those are situations where you have to choose your battles. And, I forced our team to go back and try and push for it. And eventually we did. We managed to move some money around to make way for that song. And those are the battles that I think are the most important and the most rewarding, because what you get out of them is so much. So yeah, I mean, it was not an easy 6, but it was certainly a rewarding 6 years.
And to Dan's point, Annie, how did wardrobe help you kind of develop Alexis?
It was absolutely crucial, because this is me on a dressy day. This is me on a dressy day. So, stepping into her shoes, literally, and these outfits that I never in a million years would think to wear, was so crucial in forming the character. And I thought Dan and Deb did such a great job finding the humor in the outfits too. Like Alexis deciding to come to break up with Ted in basically like a Statue of Liberty crown on springs, and it just added to the absurdity of the situation and the out of placeness of these characters. So I think the costumes did such a great job telling the story.
Dan, inclusivity was such a large part of the world of Schitt's Creek, and you've been very vocal about not telling stories about having to face hatred and bigotry in the world of Schitt's Creek. Why was that important to you, and why do you feel like that was the message that was important to send?
I mean, it really just, it came quite naturally, the decision. We didn't think about it too much. I think at the time, it really stemmed from this belief that my dad and I both felt like small towns had been so inaccurately depicted in television. It's so often that the small town is the butt of the joke, where small town people are, depicted as yokels and kind of, hayseed people who don't know what's going on. And, for us, it was really important to honor the beauty of small town life and the beauty of community in small towns. And as soon as we decided to really make the small town and the community within it the people that had their lives together, so as to juxtapose just how messy our family was, that really was the jumping off point. And then for me, I just kept thinking, well, if this town is going to be accepting to the point where they don't bat an eye, why don't we take it one step further and just not ever show the other side? Because, for me, the more you show the other side, the more you show the bigotry, even if it is to explain or to illustrate how harmful that is, you are still validating someone's beliefs by putting them on television. So for us, in a way, I guess it was a kind of a political statement without really being political, to just say we're not going to give those people anything. We are instead going to show nothing but support and encouragement and love, and hopefully use that as an illustration of just how happy and fulfilled people can be when they are surrounded by that.
You've been very vocal too about trying to avoid common sitcom tropes of people getting angry for no reason, or there being a misunderstanding that leads to like a larger thing that everyone could just talk about and really move past. Right. And Annie, I'm going to say it. Let's see if it goes off. For Alexis and Ted, when they broke up, they still had such a sense of love and understanding of each other and respect for each other. Tell us a little bit about kind of getting to explore that storyline and that goodbye with Dustin Milligan, who was fantastic as Ted.
Yeah. I think when Dustin and I found out that Ted and Alexis were breaking up, we were as shocked as you guys were when you watched it, and we were like, but this relationship has come so far, and these characters have come so far. But I think after the initial shock wore off, I came to the realization that it really was the perfect way to end their story. And I think you rarely see a relationship kind of come to an end on television and have everything be okay. And it's not. I love that this was depicted as not a defeat and not a relationship that ended badly. It was a relationship that ended in great love and respect. And I really, really appreciated being able to tell that version of a relationship. And the two characters grew so much together and individually, but they didn't change for each other, they changed with each other. And I think that showed a very, very healthy relationship. So it was, as sad as it was to actually shoot, and the day we shot was actually one of Dustin's very last days on set, so it was extra kind of emotional. But yeah, I really feel at peace with where everything ended.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was also one of the biggest challenges that we had as a team of writers too, because you have to choose every word so carefully. And I know that everyone came with their own experiences of relationships. And so it was, for me, the challenge, and I think ultimately what the payoff was this scene that was representative of so many different experiences coming together, and have, the three of us, in this case, Rupinder and Dave and I, who really sat down and had a time with that last scene, finding a way through it that honored everybody's experience in a way that felt like respectful, because it's really tricky. And I think that to me is really one of the more fulfilling parts of being in a writer's room, as it is a challenge. It's also, you get to know people, you get to understand other people's experiences in ways that you might not have before. And you have to have a certain level of openness to why and how certain people might be pushing for certain things and other things. I was listening to a podcast recently about some of the decisions that were made in Sex and the City, and, how all the writers would get into huge screaming fights with each other over these fundamental choices that were made for these characters. And ultimately would all end up with a laugh at the end of the day. But you do realize that you try and, particularly in what we were doing here, you wanted to depict something that felt really human, really real, and you never wanted it to feel schmaltzy or too television. And that's a fine line to draw with two different characters who are coming from two different backgrounds. So I was very pleased, and fortunately we have very, very, very talented, brilliant actors executing those words. So that helped.
Well, talk to us a little bit about crafting the end of the series, because obviously this happened about midway through, or at least around that point of the 6th season, and you still had a few more episodes to wrap up everyone else's storylines. It was very well received, which I have to say, of covering television for as long as I have, it's very rare to see a series finale come around that is so universally applauded. What was important to you in crafting the end of this journey for them, and what are you hoping that people take away from the show?
Well, first of all, just hearing you say that gave me a whole other sigh of relief, because all you hope to do with a series finale is make people feel like their journey watching the show is worth it, and I think that's why series finales are so hard, because it's the last thing that you're sending people away with. And if you don't execute that properly, or if you don't respect certain characters, or, you know, give your audience certain things, then, you know, suddenly people are walking away from your show with like a very strange or resentful taste in their mouth. So it was a challenge. I think for me, the biggest part was making sure that we laid the groundwork up to that series finale throughout the last 2 seasons, so that nothing felt like it was, so that, you know, those last 2 episodes didn't feel like suddenly we're wrapping up every single character's story, kind of bloated or, you know, complicated. And I think that's why we did choose to put the Alexis and Ted breakup halfway through the season, because those are moments that need time and they need space and they need attention. And if you do it properly, you can give those moments of closure a great deal of respect that doesn't have to happen at the very end of the show. So it was really about laying the runway to make sure that those last 2 episodes felt really light, even though, you know, part 1 of the finale was a little bit heavier. It was still a very clean story. It wasn't it didn't feel muddled. And I felt really good about it. I knew that, you know, we went back and forth in terms of whether we wanted episodes 13 and 14 to be switched, to do the wedding first and then have the goodbyes. But it was decided that, you know, it was much more, it felt more in line with the show to end on a really joyful, funny note than to have the last episode be, you know, tears and revelation. So, you know, I was really glad that we decided on putting that, you know, the goodbyes and the decision to leave in 13, and then having 14 really be about a very Schitt's Creek thing, which is how these people will navigate a wedding.
Well, it was beautifully done. And, you know, I know obviously all the fans wish that there was much more Schitt's Creek content to consume. But if you had to go out, this was a beautiful way to go out. I appreciate both of you taking the time to be here today. I know these videos are enjoyed, especially during this quarantine time, people working on their crafts at home, as I'm sure you all are as well. We are very excited to see what you do next. But for the time being, I just appreciate your time here today.
Thanks for having us.
Good talking.